You are not losing respect by accident. You are bleeding it out in front of predators who can smell hesitation the way wolves smell blood. Every extra word you offer, every explanation you force, every moment you bend your spine to be understood is not kindness. It is confession. It is evidence. It is the quiet announcement that you are negotiable. And the world does not negotiate with what it can dominate. It consumes it. You were taught that respect is earned through patience, through giving, through proving your worth like some desperate merchant laying out his soul on a table. But that doctrine is a beautifully packaged lie. It sounds moral, almost noble, while it quietly trains you to kneel. The truth is cold, surgical, and deeply uncomfortable. Respect is not granted to effort. It is surrendered to presence, to restraint, to the unnerving aura of someone who does not chase, does not plead, and does not fracture under pressure. That is why the more you tried, the more invisible you became, because desperation is loud and power is silent. There was a man I will call Victor Hale, not because his name matters, but because his pattern does. Victor once believed exactly what you believe now, that if he explained himself clearly enough, showed loyalty long enough, and proved his intentions deeply enough, even his enemies would eventually soften. But enemies are not confused observers waiting for clarity. They are strategic opportunists waiting for weakness. Every time Victor clarified, he revealed. Every time he gave more, he reduced his own value. Every time he bent, he confirmed that he could be bent again. You think people respect transparency, but what they truly respect is controlled opacity, the disciplined refusal to reveal everything. Mystery creates distance. Distance creates gravity, and gravity pulls respect toward you without effort. Victor learned this the hard way, through humiliation so precise it felt almost designed. Conversations where his words were twisted, kindness that was exploited, silence that would have protected him, but his need to be understood betrayed him. Slowly, he began to see the pattern. People did not treat him based on who he was. They treated him based on what he tolerated. And what he tolerated was everything. This is where most people break. Not because they lack strength, but because they cling to a moral fantasy that endurance will be rewarded. The world does not reward silent suffering. It normalizes it. It builds expectations on top of it. It turns it into your identity. And once that identity is fixed, you are no longer a person to be respected. You become a role to be used. The shift begins when you accept something that feels almost immoral at first. You do not owe clarity to those who weaponize your honesty. You do not owe consistency to those who exploit your predictability. You do not owe access to those who cannot handle your presence without diminishing it. Victor stopped explaining, not dramatically, but surgically. He began to answer less, reveal less, react less. At first, the reaction was not respect. It was confusion, irritation, even aggression. Because when you remove your availability, you disrupt the system people built around controlling you. They will test you, push you, provoke you, trying to pull you back into the old pattern. This is the moment that defines everything. If you break here and return to explaining, you confirm that your silence was temporary. But if you hold, calmly, coldly, without theatrics, you introduce something far more powerful than argument: uncertainty. And uncertainty is where respect begins to grow. Because what cannot be predicted cannot be easily controlled. Victor became quieter, but not weaker, more distant, but not absent, more selective, but not unavailable. His enemies, the same ones who once dismissed him, began to hesitate, not out of kindness, but out of calculation. They could no longer map his reactions. They could no longer anticipate his responses. In that hesitation, space appeared, and space is the currency of respect. You were told to be consistent, to be predictable, to be reliable. But comfort breeds complacency, and complacency erodes respect. The most respected individuals are not the most agreeable or the most giving. They are the most controlled, the most measured, the most internally anchored. Victor did not become cruel. He became precise. And precision is often mistaken for coldness by those who benefited from your chaos. When you stop overgiving, it feels like withholding to those who were used to taking without consequence. There is a quiet cruelty in this transformation, not because you harm others, but because you stop protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. You are not becoming darker, you are becoming defined. And definition forces others to recalibrate how they approach you. The less you try to be respected, the more respect begins to appear. Interruptions become pauses. Dismissiveness becomes caution. Familiarity becomes distance. The same people who once overlooked you begin to measure their words, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer tolerate what once felt normal. Respect is not something you extract from others. It is something you enforce through what you refuse to accept. You are afraid that if you stop explaining, you will be misunderstood. If you stop giving, you will be seen as selfish. If you stop bending, you will be labeled difficult. But those fears are the chains that keep you accessible, manageable, and harmless. And harmless people are rarely respected. They are tolerated, used, and eventually forgotten. The path forward is quiet. It is not dramatic. It will not give you immediate validation. It is a series of small, deliberate choices. Restraint over reaction, silence over explanation, distance over desperation. Each choice will feel unnatural at first, even wrong. But over time, those choices accumulate and reshape how you are perceived and how you see yourself. Victor did not win by convincing his enemies to respect him. He won by becoming someone whose presence forced respect as a byproduct. People do not rise to your expectations. They fall to your boundaries. If your boundaries are weak, inconsistent, or negotiable, no amount of effort will compensate for that deficiency. The question is not whether you deserve respect. You do. The question is whether you are willing to become the version of yourself that no longer bargains for it. The moment you stop performing for approval is the moment you become difficult to ignore, difficult to manipulate, and eventually impossible to dismiss. And that is when even your enemies, especially your enemies, begin to pause. They calculate. And in that brief, silent hesitation, you will find the only form of respect that has ever truly mattered. Even your enemies will respect you after this.